delighted to have Secretary of State Raffensperger with us today to talk about what's making the turbulent Georgia elections tick. You know, one of our goals, as Catherine mentioned, is a civic and civil dialogue on a platform that is non-partisan. We want to make sure that we have more here than just media sound bites. No offense out there to the media. We want to be able to discuss issues that affect our businesses and affect ourselves. So that's the goal of the program committee. Secretary Raffensperger has been Secretary of State since 2019, and if you read a lot in the paper, you realize that you may think that elections are the only thing that he takes care of for the state of Georgia. Well, he's also in charge of corporate registrations, the state's more than 40 licensing boards, securities offered and sold in Georgia, and fundraising by charities in Georgia. And you have to add to that portfolio, he's responsible for the cemeteries in Georgia. Raise your hand if you knew that. I did not. That's brand new information for me. Thank you. So from 2015 to 19, Brad served 2 terms as a Georgia General Assembly representing District 50, and before that he was on the Johns Creek City Council. In the great Georgia tradition of citizen statesmen, the Secretary is also owner and operator of 2 small businesses in Georgia. One is Tendon Systems, a specialty contracting and engineering firm, and the second is a specialty steel manufacturing plant in Forsyth County. He even wrote a book, Integrity Counts, and I've asked him for this not to be on his book tour, but I encourage you to read it if you want to find out what the Secretary's been doing for the last 12 months. He earned a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Western University and an MBA from our own Georgia State. He's also a licensed professional engineer in 30 states. And he's been married for 42 years to his nursery school sweetheart, Tricia. That's the best I could see. Mr. Secretary, thank you for your service. Delighted to have you. Come on up and the stage is yours.
Well, good afternoon. It's always great to start these meetings off with some dry humor. But I met Tricia, saw her for the first time in the 11th grade, started dating in the 12th, and got married halfway through engineering school. And those last 2 years were the best 2 years of our lives, I sometimes think, because we were broke, but we were in love, and we had enough, and that's all that really mattered. So finished up and didn't have all those distractions once I got married, too. But anyway, I'm Brad Raffensperger, Secretary of State. And what I thought I'd do today is really best I can do, because I understand we live in polarized times. I understand that, and so do you. But what I want to do is explain really where we are, how we got where we are, but in a nonpartisan, bipartisan way. So no food fights, please. But I do love speaking before Rotarians, because if you look at Rotary nationwide, worldwide, you're optimistic, positive, and you're always looking for solutions. And what's really, really tremendous about what Rotary does, you accomplish what you set your goals for. Years ago, you said we want to defeat polio, and you really led that effort, and polio was defeated. And then there was a Rotarian up in Roswell, Georgia, that said we need to take on human sex trafficking, and now that effort has been led, by not just Rotary, but also the governor and obviously Marty Kemp. And that's tremendous, and that's really just not a Georgia problem; it's a nationwide problem. So I salute you for that. And I had a friend that was a roofer of all things, and he said, "Yeah, I'm getting involved with Rotary about clean water." I'm thinking, roofing and water. But Rotary wanted to make sure you had clean water throughout the world. And so whatever Rotary sets their mind to fix things, they get it done. And I think that really says a lot, because what you do to get things going in the right direction is that you read your 4-way test. Just imagine every morning if up in Washington, D.C., they read the 4-way test. Is it the truth? Wow, wouldn't that be great? And is it beneficial to all concerned? And will it build goodwill? But at the end of the day, it's about getting things done. And I think that's really important. Also, since some of you follow politics in Georgia, I do want to let you know that when I was in the General Assembly, I was just really excited to be part of that group of people. And I won in a special election, and they plopped me down in this empty seat, and I had a Democrat on this side and a Democrat on that side. And what's really cool is that this Democrat over here, Patty Bentley, her and her husband own a funeral home. down in Middle Georgia, Peach County. And on this side was Erica Thomas. And she had been raised in a foster home situation, and I'm a business owner. And so Patty and I understood business, but we all understood that we wanted to do the work for people in Georgia. And I know that there was those, quote, team votes. We didn't agree on all things. But when we had our disagreements or we had our conversations, and they were conversations, they were always built on mutual respect. And I think that's really what we need in the political realm. Keep your values, but let's have conversations so we can get things done for everyone. So I wanted to first talk about today SB 202, which is the Election Integrity Act of 2021. Kind of explain what it does do and what it doesn't do, because there was a lot of misinformation, disinformation. I guess everyone loves the best parts of a bill, and for me, the best part of that bill is that we've incorporated, for the very first time, photo ID on the absentee ballot situation with your driver's license number. So now if you have absentee voting, you'll have driver's license number with photo ID. You show up to vote on the early voting, you have photo ID. Election day, photo ID. It really unifies the process, but you have photo ID, which is an objective criteria. People say, why did you change everything if you had such a great election in 2020? Well, did you know that we had been sued by both the Democrat Party and the Republican Party over a signature match? Both of them said it was subjective. Guess what? I think so too. So when I ran in 2018, I said, let's have an objective measure. And I think driver's license number is very objective. So I think for me, that was probably one of the big things, because when we do that and we have objectivity, it's tough to argue with facts. It's tough to argue with the picture. And so I think that's really good. It shores up voter confidence. And after 2020, voter confidence took a major hit. We also have some accountability measures. I think the one that I really like is that lines have to be shorter than 1 hour. The counties did a tremendous job in 2020. We had the June 2020 primary, and that was very difficult in some counties. And really, the larger the county was, the more they struggled. But it wasn't just the metro counties. But we went to work with the counties and making sure that they had the objective criteria, and they did a great job. They made sure they had enough machines for the number of voters that were going to show up on Election Day. And I screenshotted what they had on November Election Day, and we had an average wait time of 3 minutes. It got as low as 2 at one point. There were some precincts that were about 50 minutes, but I didn't see a single one over an hour. And so with SB 202, lines have to be shorter than an hour. That's a good thing. So I think that's a very positive measure also. Now, there is one measure that has its pluses and it has its minuses, but I do like accountability. If you have a county that has failed and really just struggled with making sure it could start an election at 7 a.m., finish at 7 p.m., and get their vote totals done quickly, we never had a way for us the state to be able to hold them accountable because counties run elections. With SB 202, the state election board has that accountability measure, and you can have a review panel. And right now they're investigating Fulton County. What's really interesting, I use this example, but just imagine you got little Johnny, and little Johnny knows that the teacher never checks his homework. Little Johnny, if he's not really diligent, may not do his homework. But when little Johnny knows that the teacher is checking the homework, all of a sudden, you have those eyes looking over your shoulder, things get done. And already we've seen that Fulton County is really paying attention and working hard at improving their process. There's a review panel that's going on right now, so you understand it's a bipartisan review panel. It consists of a Democrat election board member from Gwinnett County. It just happened to be Gwinnett. He's an engineer. I do like engineers. So he'll be very thoughtful and thorough. And then we have a Republican from a rural county. They'll be working together with our general counsel, doing a deep dive, getting all that information. At the end of the day, what we want as a Fulton County resident, we want the process to make sure it's smooth and runs like all the other counties. But so do the other 158 counties. Every county wants to get the results for all the counties so we can move forward. Now, I do have said and been very clear that I thought it best really the Secretary of State to chair that, and I no longer chair that. But be that as it may, I do think that having accountability is always a good thing. We do have Dropbox safeguards in place. So when you show up to vote, if you want to drop off your absentee ballot, that will now be dropped off at a county election location where there's early voting going during the early voting period. And so that is based on population, 1 for every 100,000. Some people would like to have more, and I've heard from actually some of the rural counties would like to have a few more, one for each of their precincts. The General Assembly said for the first time of putting this into state law, we're going to do one for every 100,000. What many people don't realize, although Fulton County and the metro counties had a lot of drop boxes, some counties, there were 35 of them, didn't have a single drop box in 2020. Now every single county will have to have a drop box. And I like the idea that's uniform, one for every 100,000 people. We also, we're going to have to work on this because this last election we had, there's an 11-day period where you have to request your absentee ballot. So in other words, 11 days before the election, you request your absentee ballot. And when you make that request, that gives the county time to receive your request, process the request, send the ballot back to you, then you send the ballot back to the county. And what happened in this last election cycle, some voters weren't aware of that. And so that really goes to voter education. I'm sure that both the political parties, all the political parties and outside organizations will be doing lots of voter education. I see a role for the Secretary of State's office to do that for 2022, but also each of the county election directors to make sure voters understand there's 11-day turnout. Before SB 202, people could send in their ballot, their request on the Friday before. The county wouldn't even get it before Tuesday. It was really just a cruel joke on voters. This way, there's a process in place, but we do need to make sure voters are aware there is a change there. So those are really the big changes, and I'll take questions later if we have time, and I'll take whatever questions you might have about that. But I did want to talk about what happened on the election of November 2020, so you can really understand exactly what was the situation. There were a lot of allegations that were made. And I wrote a 10-page letter to Congress. It's on our website, sos.ga.gov, and you can read that. So what was alleged is that there was 10,315 dead people that voted. In my letter, I said there was 2. I need to update that. Ryan Germany told me about a month ago, Brad, we found 2 more. So we found 4 dead people, not 10,000 dead people. And obviously, we do an investigation. They'll be brought before. It won't be the dead people, but the people that voted for them. But they'll be coming before the state election board for prosecution. They said that there were 66,000 underage voters. There's actually 0. But what you have to understand in Georgia, many people don't because we're all over 18 years old here, but you can register to vote when you're 17 and a half. But we knew what their birth dates were, day, month, year. But that's not out there for everyone else. We don't put social security numbers out there. We don't put your private information out there. And that wasn't out there. But we could verify that there was actually 0 underage voting. They said that there was 2,400 non-registered voters. There was 0. They said there was about 2,500 felons that voted. We identified no more than 74, and there's ongoing investigations for the remainder of those. You add it all up, there was never enough to overturn the results of the election. President Trump came up short in the state of Georgia. We can talk about the State Farm Arena, and if you really look at what happened, it was very unfortunate. But Rudy Giuliani came and talked to a state Senate meeting, and what he in fact did was slice and diced a video and showed it out of sequence. If you watch the whole run of tape, and the GBI has, the FBI has, and so has WSB, and what they can verify is those big ballot boxes for absentee ballots that weren't counted. They were empty in the morning. They were closed up, zip-tied, put underneath the tables. When they thought they were done at 10:30, then they pulled out these boxes and put those unscanned ballots underneath, zip-tied it, put it underneath. And then about 30 minutes later said, no. We caught them before they left, and Rick Barron said, no, we want you to continue counting till at least 1 or 2 o'clock because the other counties are doing that. So when they pulled them out, those are the ballots that they put in 20 minutes earlier. That's all it was. But Rudy Giuliani then said that they were stuffing ballots. They weren't, and they didn't double scan it. FBI, we called them. They came down. GBI came down. They also interviewed the poll workers. And we had the full run of tape, and that's all part of their, investigations. And that's actually part of the January 6th investigation that has verified that nothing happened towards that. Did Fulton County have some issues on mismanagement and disorganization? Yes. But we had a monitor there, and in his 350-page report, he says, what I saw was mismanagement, disorganization, but I saw no illegality and no ballot stuffing. And that's very important for people to understand. We also did a deep dive on the pristine ballots, and that then was heard by a judge, and then he rejected that lawsuit on the pristine ballots. So this room, I'll just assume that half the people here voted this way, half the people voted that way. So for the people that are on my side, the Republican side, I want to help give them 3 data points, but you can share this with everyone. When I do that, it really helps explain what happened in 2020. 28,000 Georgians skipped the presidential ballot. They didn't vote for anyone at the top of the ticket, but yet they voted down ballot. So they voted for the U.S. Senate, congressman, county commissioner, state rep, state senator, water and sewer board, county surveyor, but they voted down ballot, but they left the top blank. And Senator David Perdue got 20,000 more votes in Metro Atlanta and Athens than President Trump did. And in the Republican congressional areas, they actually received 33,000 more votes than President Trump. And I think when you look at those 3 data points, that really tells you what happened in the election. Because all the other information I shared, those other data points, people then can debate, oh, it wasn't, 74 felons, what was it, 73, 72? Well, it doesn't matter when 28,000 Georgians show up to vote and they skip the presidential ballot. So that's really what happened in 2020. But our job is to make sure we have honest and fair elections in Georgia, and that's what I'm committed to do. I think that we have the appropriate guardrails. On this side is accessibility, and on this side is making sure we have the appropriate safeguards, accessibility and safeguards. And I understand there's a tension there. And some people would like to have more of this, and some people would like to have more of that. But we have these guardrails in place, and our job is to make sure we walk the line of integrity and make sure we have fair and honest elections. But I also want to give a shout out, if we have any poll workers here, awesome. What you do is so important, and you think about the average age of poll workers before the pandemic was 72. We put out a big will call, and all organizations were doing that, big poll work. We actually found over 50,000 additional poll workers to replace the ones that we had lost. And so we had plenty of people, not just on the bench, but out there, working those 16-hour days. You imagine if you're over 70 years old working a 16-hour day. You have to just salute those people. And what you have to understand, the poll workers that are working those precincts, those are the people you see at the grocery store. Those are the people you see at Rotary, Kiwanis, at your church groups. You see them all over at soccer fields, football fields. They're your neighbors. And when you start understanding those are the people that are walking that, do you trust your neighbor? I do. And so you can trust people because it has integrity built up and down the line. Your counties are fighting hard for that. So it's not just me that's making sure I'm holding, fast on that. It's also your county election directors. And that should give you great hope and great confidence in the elections. I know that 2022, we can say the same thing about 2022 like I did in January of 2020. I said, I understand at the end of the day, half the people are going to be happy, half the people are going to be sad. But I want 100% of the people to have confidence in the results of the election process. And I'm going to fight hard to make sure that's what you'll have in 2022. So if we have time, I'm more than happy to take as many questions as time affords us.
All right, we do have time for questions. Who'd like to start us off?
I guess RK is not here, so I will. But I'm an educator, and there's educators. I'm at Emory, but there's people from Georgia State, Georgia Tech, et cetera. Could you talk about some of the wellspring of the integrity that you demonstrated? And I hope people across the political spectrum would see that it took a lot of integrity. And then is there anything we can do in the schools or universities to try to have people stand up for their principles? Should we have civics classes, et cetera?
Well, I think it starts really at your parent level, when you're raising up your kids. And I look at my dad, World War II generation. I call it small town values, but I really think in World War II, it didn't matter if you came from Brooklyn, you came from the coal fields of West Virginia or the cotton fields of South Georgia. I think that we had those unifying values, and it's really character, integrity, common decency. I went down to Bainbridge, and there was a person that came down from the metro region and started throwing out all these, argumentative questions to me. I could just see Carol Hurd kind of cringing, thinking, we don't do that here. And so I don't want to see those values just in small town because they're good values. They're Rotary values. They're universal values of kindness. And Ronald Reagan even talked about kindness, so it doesn't mean I can be conservative and still be kind. And I think that's really important. Kindness is really important. I think that our teachers have a big part to play, but also the National Association of Secretaries of State. We hold up it as our model, the Margaret Chase Smith Award. And she actually, as a Republican senator, stood up and took on Joseph McCarthy in the 50s. And she talked about the 4 horsemen of calumny. I hope I said that word right. It's a big word. Lawyers can say that. Engineers can't. But she took it on, and that was kind of when his bubble got burst. And within 4 years, he was virtually gone out of the Senate. And so that's the kind of people we need to esteem, people that actually stand up and do the right thing. And wherever we can use them as role models, I think that's really good. And we have modern-day role models. And so we find those from all different walks of life, all different demographic groups, and all the 4 corners of this earth. My wife is a photographer. We travel all over the country. And I just love our country. It's beautiful land, but we have great people. Doesn't matter where they are. And so I think that's what we need to never forget about that.
Okay.
Secretary, first of all, thank you for being here today, and thank you for what you and your family went through. I know it was incredibly difficult standing up for what you thought was right, and it didn't go unnoticed. But one of the questions I have, and you mentioned the accountability measure, is that in reading that, it seems somewhat vague and open to interpretation as to what makes someone doing right by the election. And I think there's a lot of concern about whether or not, depending on who's sitting in the governor's office at that time, could say about a local election and whether or not they're satisfied with the results of that. So can you talk about how accountability is actually measured in hard terms and what that would look like for someone overtaking an election?
Well, number one, the General Assembly writes bills, and that's the law. But then the State Election Board writes administrative code. And that's really the rule book for all the counties to follow. So did they start at 7? Did they finish at 7? Those type of things. So it's really following all the procedures. And that's what gets counties, I guess you could say, in trouble. And then an investigation starts as it relates to counties. As it relates to the State Election Board, that now consists of the Democrat Party, Republican Party, the General Assembly on the House side and the Senate side pick 4 members, and then the governor does. And right now there's not a chair, there's an acting chair of that. So there's 4 members. But it will always have, a voice of one party heard no matter how it swings one way or the other. But that law does not give the authority of the State Election Board to overturn any results. It's really backward looking at what happened in the last election. It's not coming in and then undermining the results. The people's voice is the people's voice.
Okay. Question over here?
Hi there, Andrew Staunton. I'm the British Consul General. I'd just like to add my thanks to the role of politicians. I'm a career diplomat, but people who stand for elected office and provide a service to the communities, I think it's a wonderful thing to do. Obviously, November 22, there'll be a couple of very important elections, the governor's election, but also for the second Senate seat or the junior Senate seat. How do you, through your office, avoid what happened in 2020, and what do you think the most challenging aspects that you'll face will be in that period when both at the national level and the state level there'll be a lot of money spent here trying to win 2 very pivotal contests? Thank you.
Well, as soon as COVID hit, our world got changed. Our big lift, we thought, for 2020 was having the new verifiable paper ballot. But one of the things that we did, we were very proactive. We stood up an absentee ballot fraud task force, which was bipartisan. One of the members was Bobby Christine from the Southern District. But we also had Democrat, former district prosecuting attorneys to make sure we had all eyes on it. We wanted to make sure people had confidence in the absentee ballot process. But also, we had a really close election result. House Bill 316, which we passed in 2019, required us to go ahead and have an audit of a statewide race. I picked the presidential race because obviously that had the most national significance, and we could have just run those ballots through the scanners, but people were saying that machines flip votes, so we did a hand recount. So we did everything that we could. In fact, I went out there and did many press conferences. Gabriel Sterling was out there virtually almost every day, so we would have sometimes 2 press conferences, sometimes 3 press conferences a day. I'm not here to sell books, but if you look at my book, it'll actually say, this is what we did on this day. We're out there almost every day dispelling rumors. But you have to understand, our office, on a good day, might have 40,000 Twitter followers, and it had probably well less than 20 at the beginning of the cycle, and then some other people have 80 million Twitter followers. That's like the Swiss Army trying to take on the American Army. It's not, they're good soldiers over there in Switzerland, but you're just outmanned, and that's really what happened. So it gets down to, we had to make sure we walked our integrity every day and we spoke the truth. And every day I was asking my team also, did we miss anything? What can we do? We want to give voters confidence in that, and that's what we did. So we can't control other people. The only person that I can control is really myself and my team. I gotta look at myself in the mirror every day. It's the man in the mirror.
I have a question, actually. How did you get interested in the role that you currently lead? And also, if you had to look back on a person who most shaped your personal values, who would that be?
Well, my dad definitely, but, because a father and a son is just a real, I think sometimes moms by boys and girls maybe, but they don't get appreciated. They're doing all this work. I had a sister a year older, a year younger, and then one sister 6 years younger, and a brother 15 years. So my mom was pretty darn busy, but my dad was, my hunting, I was his guide, I guess you'd say, or his hound dog, but hunting, fishing, sports, and that's kind of what our world was. As long as I did good in school, got B's, sometimes some A's, and that was good enough. So my dad was definitely, and my dad was an honest guy, quiet, self-assuming, worked hard. So I think that's the value system. And what the other part of the question was?
Just about how you got interested in your current role.
Well, I loved working in the General Assembly because you're looking at all of Georgia. And really, it's particularly when you have a metro Atlanta district, I understand metro Atlanta is important, but so is rural Georgia. And so really you start listening and talking to other parts of the state, and you see that they have struggles too. So it really gives you a statewide perspective. But the Secretary of State's office is a great spot for someone that comes out of the business community because we have professional licensing. I'm a licensed structural engineer, licensed general contractor. I understand how important that is. Corporations, I got lots of corporations. I think that's got to run like a Swiss timepiece. I think about securities and charities. We want to make sure we have honest charities. We make sure you pay for that cemetery plot. When you do pass on to the great beyond, that there's actually a plot there for you. So that's really important. And then elections, I think it's really important that we have fair and honest elections. I think only American citizens should vote in our elections. And then make sure that you're over 18 and make sure you're a Georgia resident. Buying that's about it. So then go ahead and knock yourself out and pick your horse and run hard for it. So I just believe in that. So I think it kind of touches all those wheelhouses, and we've been pretty busy.
Yes. Sorry. Back in the back.
As everybody in the room knows, we Atlanta lost the All-Star game as a result of Commissioner Manfred's decision that our legislators had passed a bill that was unsatisfactory. Can you talk about the rest of the country and the voting bills that they have, and how our voter bill compared to those? Because when you read about our bill from various sources, it doesn't seem to be that extraordinary of a restrictive bill as it was cast to be at the moment. So can you speak about how are we a big outlier, or
No.
Are there a good number of states that have more restrictive voter rights bills?
We've had no excuse absentee voting since 2005, signed into law by Governor Sonny Perdue, supported by the Georgia GOP chairman, David Schaefer, when he's a state senator, and David Ralston when he was a state representative. So that's been the law of the land in Georgia since 2005, and that was not changed. We had 16 days of early voting. Now it's up to 17 mandatory days plus 2 for counties. That's more than New York, New Jersey, and Delaware. Also, years ago, now been about 5-6 years ago, Secretary of State Brian Kemp, he went ahead and he did automated voter registration with Department of Driver Services. And some people on the right actually didn't care for that. What it did is it shot our numbers up for registrations, but what it really gave us was good data. Because when we're tied in with the Department of Driver Services, as soon as you move from one part of the state to the other, then you're going to update your driver's license, so we have good data. And so we also have record registrations. We have right now about 7.5 million voters. We had record registrations, and we also have record turnout. Record turnout in 2018, we had 4 million. Last year in 2020, we had 5 million voters. If you look at everything that we've done, most states have a cutoff for absentee ballot. Ours is 11 days, and you'll really look at states go from 7 to 11 to 13, some. And some states still have excuse-based. You need to get a permission slip from the doctor to show up. And that's just, to me, it's a big burden for people to really work on that. So we're really, I would say, very balanced in what we have. We have photo ID, which is supported by the majority of people in both political parties and every single demographic group. They know it makes sense.
Okay, yeah, yes.
I think in the social environment of cocktail parties, dinner parties over the last number of years, having political discussions has become very difficult, where we're walking on eggshells to the point where we just don't have political conversations like we did years ago. In the environment where tens of millions of Americans think the last election was stolen, it becomes very difficult to talk back and forth at the table. As we go forward, do you have some ideas as to how we might be able to have more balanced social conversations where we get along with each other? Maybe it's part of the law, maybe whatever, but you're smiling because you know the answer.
Well, I think speak in your Rotary voice, not your contractor voice. Because I've been in many construction trailers, and so I know lots of language, and I think out there when you're talking to folks, I think being calm and let everyone be heard, because we all have different ideas. In fact, just look at your family. You get all together for Thanksgiving, Christmas, something like that, and it's not everyone's going to think just like you. Even though you may even be on the same side of the aisle, there's still going to be points you want to pick with. I think just be respectful of each other. It just really, we have to understand that I believe that we're all created by the Lord, and I think that we're created in His image, and we are children of God, and I think the more we're kind to each other, I think that's a good thing.
One more question here.
First of all, thank you for your service and for leadership by example as much as the leadership of the role. I'm struck by your comment about the 1,000 or 100,000 rule, and you'd heard from some of the rural counties that there really would be interest in trying to, particularly the larger counties or where populations spread out, maybe a place where they could drop the ballot in more than one place. I also think there are very few counties in Georgia that have 100,000 population. Is there any chance that we might get this changed in order to move the line shorter so that the various places that are required to have advanced voting polling stations could also have a drop box? I don't know whether that's possible in the current political environment, but it seems to me it would help both the rural and the urban.
Well, to your question, it's a General Assembly issue, but I know some of the county election directors have talked to me, but they know who their state reps are and their state senators. We've just run an election cycle, and so that's a great time for the first. I know it's a low turnout with the mayor's race versus next year, but still it's a great walkthrough or run-through, and so now they can come back and say, this is what we really need for our counties, and that's what I would encourage every one of them to do, is talk to their state reps, talk to the state senators, and say, oh, if it's not this number, what should it be, or should it be one for every early voting precinct? Because I've heard from actually many of the rural counties also, and it's just interesting, and I understand what they're saying, but that's not my job. My job is to follow the law. And the state reps and the state senators, they're the General Assembly. They pass the laws.
Any other questions? No? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Fascinating insights. Thank you so much, Secretary Raffensperger. Thank you for your integrity and for your service to our state. This has just been a fascinating conversation today. We truly appreciate your coming to be with us. Please join us next week. As I said, we have CEO Sheffield Hale from the Atlanta History Center. Hope you all have a wonderful week. Thank you.